Hello, all. Welcome back. This is this day in history for August 20th, 2024. And as you know, it's not about the year; it's about the history of the date. And we have some pretty interesting stuff. We have not a whole lot of birthdays, but we have just a lot of interesting stuff that happened on this day. And it's like so across the board. It's like some days we have where it's heavily laden with like political maneuvers, or like we have a lot of celebrity birthdays, or stuff like that. But I mean, it's this yeah, no, let's just get into it, shall we? So the very first birthday is that we have here today is 1833, excuse me. That is the birth of Benjamin Harrison. uh, he was a moderate Republican. He was our 23rd U.S. president. 1931, we see the birth of Don King. Don King was, okay, if you grew up in the same time frame that I did, um, you would have seen, even if you're older than me, you would have seen the Little Rascals, the original Little Rascals, not the movie remake that they did several years ago. Um, but what I'm getting with that is I used to watch, you know, old reruns of the Little Rascals where all those kids were doing their little thing there, and they had a kid by the name of Buckwheat, right? And he had this crazy hair that just went back, and uh, Don King had that kind of buckwheat hair. It was like a running gag. I remember always thinking about how Don King was buckwheat all grown up, all grown up. Um, but at any rate, Don King was I don't know if I don't even know if he's still alive, to be honest. I don't know if he's still in the game or not, but he was an American boxing promoter, and he promoted a lot of great fighters, including Mike Tyson. He was a very shrewd businessman. He you always hear the horror stories of promoters and how they're all about the money. Sure, they secure big paydays for their clients, but they also take a big chunk of those paydays, and that's like the biggest uh, you know negative aspect that you always hear about promoters. But I mean, he was very effective at what he did. He was very good on the mic. In the wrestling business, they talk about cutting a promo. He was really good, to use wrestling vernacular. He was very good at cutting promos before and after fights, and I mean, he was just really good at what he did. And he was, you know, Don King is I mean, he was basically in the '80s, especially in the '90s. He was a household name as far as like a who's who in the boxing world. But his birthday is today, 1931. 1935, Ron Paul, American politician. If you follow politics at all, you know that he was a politician. I think he's retired now, but he was um, a senator, I believe, and he was always known for voting down big, crucial bills. And his big thing was like, hey, you're all asking me why I voted this down, because I actually read what was in the bill, and it's not good for this country. It's not constitutionally viable. I'm striking this down. And a lot of the times, this stuff would always get voted in anyway. Um, like Obamacare, I believe that he opposed Obamacare. When I lived in Kentucky, his son Rand Paul was the senator from Kentucky, and no, I never bumped elbows with him. Would love to have. I mean, I would love to have like shook his hand, said hi, been cordial and all that. But Ron Paul's birthday is today. Born in 1935. Born in 1944, we have a former Prime Minister of India, Rajiv Gandhi. Near as I can tell, not related to Mahatma Gandhi. His mother was a prime minister. His brother was in politics. his brother died, and then his mom kind of pushed him into politics. His mother was assassinated. He took over, kind of like a minor party situation. I guess they have multiple levels of parliament there, and that his mother groomed him into getting into, and then he became prime minister, and then he got out of, he did his bit, and then he himself was assassinated many years later by some militants from some other country. All because he was on the campaign trail. He was drumming up support for something. I don't know if he was running, or it wasn't really clear whether he was running for something or if he was just supporting someone else who was running. But he was assassinated by way of if I remember right, a car bomb that was disguised as flowers in a basket. The perpetrators were rounded up. They were caught. They were sentenced to the fullest extent of the law. Yeah. 1958, we see the birth of David O. Russell. He is an American director and screenwriter. Last birthday we have is 1974. Amy Adams is born, American actress. She's actually she's Italian born because she was born to an American serviceman the parents were stationed overseas at the time when she was born. Love her work. I do have a thing for redheads, and she is absolutely beautiful. She played Amelia Earhart in Night at the Museum, the comedy. She has been in American Hustle. She's been in a bunch of stuff. She was Lois Lane in the Henry Cavill Superman movie. Yeah, she's been in a lot of stuff. I mean, I love her. Happy birthday, Amy. So we get into the history. The day is, or the year rather, it's 1690, and I'm not really quite sure why this was put up there. I'm not sure if they're saying that it started on this day or what. But all it said was that it is thought enslaved people were brought to English colony of Jamestown, Virginia, and that's all they have. 1619. I guess the assumption is, like, it's this day in history, so this happened on this date. Well, okay, so Britannica.com, are you saying that this is the day when slaves started pouring into Jamestown? Because I'm not quite clear on what you're meaning by that, but yeah. If you understand geography at all, and you're good with geography, you know that there's this waterway between Russia and Alaska called the Bering Strait. Ever wonder why it was called the Bering Strait? I always did, and I think I found out why. So here it is, 1794. No, excuse me, I'm getting ahead of myself. 1741, Danish explorer Vitus Bering, who was working for the Russian government at the time, he happens to encounter Alaska. He's, he's exploring around there. He's off the east coast of the, Russia. And what does he discover? He discovers that there is, here's the eastern part of Russia. And what do you know? Here is Alaska. And here's this little strait in between. So they named it Bering Strait, presumably after him. And he's the one who discovered Alaska, which, there for a time, Alaska became, Russian territory. And then we bought it from the Russians. Go figure. 1794, U.S. General Mad Anthony Wayne defeated New Indian Confederation in the Battle of Fallen Timbers. Basically, we got into it with some natives, and this general defeated them. That's all I know. End of story. 1865, Austria and Prussia, they signed this Convention of Gastein. Basically, it was an agreement that would temporarily postpone the final struggle between them and the hegemony over Germany. So, if you know, again, if you know your geography, if you look at the country of Germany, East Germany / Western Poland was an area known as Prussia. Austria is south of Germany, and Hungary and all that area. So basically, the two sides were vying for control of what I would call Germania, but because like it's the country of Germany as we know it today didn't really become incorporated as its own sovereignty until about 20 years later. So these two parties are kind of jockeying for, okay, what's going to be our territory, what's going to be your territory, and so on and so on. 1889, you have labor activists. They closed down the entire port of the London docks in what was known as the London Dock Strike. I mean, shut it down completely. 1914, the German army captures Brussels, and it's we're talking like it's the initial invasion of Germany, as spreading out during World War I. So it's on this day that the little tiny country of Brussels has been captured. 1920, there was a meeting in Canton, Ohio, and in this meeting, the National Football League was formed as an American Professional Football Conference. So that's where the NFL gets its start, was on this day in 1920. And we talked about yesterday how Stalin came to power and how he eliminated all of his political rivals, old friends, old allies, as it were, from the old Bolsheviks, right? We were talking about how this purge started, right? So here is one of them, although it's many, many years later. The year is 1940. Leon Trotsky. So the thing about Leon Trotsky, everything that I've read, everything I've seen, because I've watched docudramas and such, everything that I've seen is that Trotsky was a lot more moderate, a lot less militant, and arguably he was probably the one who was favored the most to take over when, to succeed Lenin. He wasn't as cold and ruthless and callous as Stalin was, obviously. He was exiled after a time, and actually Stalin kind of got him basically ran him out of town, as it were. So he sets up shop. He's living in Mexico. The year is 1940. It's on this day that a Stalinist agent tracks Trotsky down in Mexico and kills him. Things could have been a lot different in this world had Leon Trotsky actually succeeded Vladimir Lenin. I don't know that we would have had the mass genocide under Trotsky that we did under Stalin, rather. But then again, to be honest, on the flip side to that, the brutality of Stalin is what saved the Russian people during World War II. So yes, he was a horrible, evil person, and he was evil incarnate. But it was through his brutality and through his sheer iron will. I mean, Stalin, it means steel. Joseph Stalin's real name was actually Joseph Zhugashvili, I think is how I'm pronouncing it right. But he for his public persona, he changed it to Stalin, meaning steel. Like he saw himself as like the man of steel. He was a tough guy. He was not somebody you wanted to mess with. Trotsky, while Trotsky was a Bolshevik, and Trotsky did go along with Lenin, and he went along with all the stuff. So I mean, like, there's blood on Trotsky's hands too. I mean, with the killing of Tsar Nicholas II's family. and all that. So I mean, Trotsky is equally, he's got that blood on his hands too. Uh, he was more, of the people minded, and he was a Marxist too. I mean, he believed in the Marxist way, but I don't think he was the militant type that was, okay with killing. Uh, I don't get the sense that he ever would have engaged in killing his political opponents, um, or anyone who, because obviously he didn't take any stabs at Stalin that I know of. He didn't try to have him killed or anything like that. And he was ran out of town, and he was left in exile. Picks up and moves on, and then is later killed in 1940. In 1960, we have another independence here. Senegal secedes from Mali Federation, declaring its full independence. 1968, the Warsaw Pact nations, except Romania and Albania, they were led by the Soviet Union. They invade Czechoslovakia to put an end to the Prague Spring. Now, I did read up a little bit on what Prague Spring was, and basically it was a movement. It was a rising up. Czechoslovakia was a communist regime, but their economy was bad. It was tanking so bad, and the youth of Czechoslovakia were disenfranchised, and they do what the youth does best. They turn to protesting. They turn to public outpour. They turn to doing whatever it is that they're doing to try to get this guy removed. And I think he was removed eventually, but but there was like this big political upheaval and uprising, and then so the Warsaw Nations, that was the Soviet Union's answer to the UN, even though they're a UN member. The UN has NATO. The communist side, they had Warsaw Pact. So basically, they kind of did their own thing as like what the UN would do. Okay, think of in the 90s we had the Bosnian thing. They had the cleansing of Milosevic. What he was doing over there, and so UN coalition forces go in there. They go to end the hostilities, and they eventually capture Milosevic and put him on trial. Right? So the Russians were basically doing the same thing. The Soviets were doing the same thing. They get their coalition, they roll into Czechoslovakia, and then they wreak havoc, and they put an end to this Prague Spring, which was basically, near as I could tell, it was basically protesting a bad situation that they themselves, it's like you don't question the government. That's kind of their attitude over there. So, yeah. 2012, Phyllis Diller dies at the age of 95. Who's Phyllis Diller? She was a comedian. She was an actor. She's actually the first female stand-up comic. Her shtick usually was raucous in nature, and it was usually self-predicating. That was just her shtick. 2014, on this day, Indian teacher BKS Iyengar dies at the age of 95. If you do yoga, it's because of this guy. This guy helped popularize yoga here in the Western Hemisphere, Western civilization. 2017, Jerry Lewis dies at the age of 91. He was an actor. He was a comedian. He was best known for his unrestrained comic style. He was in numerous movies with Dean Martin. I seem to remember that he had a telethon, and it always I remembered like this big thing with Jerry's Kids, right? But it was the muscular dystrophy. Muscular dystrophy was an important thing to him. I don't know why, but he became their spokesman. He was their spokesman for like just years and years and years. And every year he'd put on this telethon to raise money for the MDA, the Muscular Dystrophy Association. And so he did a lot of philanthropy work in that regard. So we're gonna wrap up here. The featured person's birthday is Eero Saarinen. He was Finnish-born American architect. He was a leader in a trend towards exploration/experiment in the American architectural design during the 1950s. It's a mouthful. Basically, he was an architect that was really known for pushing the innovative style of the 50s. And the featured event is on this day in 1975, Viking 1 launched. What was Viking 1? It was a robotic U.S. spacecraft built to explore the surface of Mars. It was launched on this day. We talked about this recently, and I think the reason why we talked about it is because today is the day that it launched, but that was the day that it actually landed on Mars, and it started doing its thing. But this is the day that it was launched, because nearly a year later it landed on Cres Planitia. I think I'm pronouncing it right. It's a flat lowlands region in the northern hemisphere of the planet. So we've talked about this recently. So that was when it made landfall. Today is when it actually launched. And that does it for this day in history for August 20th. We will do it again tomorrow for August 23rd, 21st. And I'm going to go to the gym. I need to get a workout in before I go to work, if I have time. So have a great day. Take care. Be blessed. We'll see you later. Bye.